There is a story relayed by the medieval sage Ibn Ezra and retold by Carl Jung of a wise and deeply religious scholar in Spain who could not bring himself to read one specific chapter of the Bible aloud. The recitation of the 89th Psalm was, for him, an act of sorrow too profound to bear. To understand his heartbreak, we must enter the psalm ourselves. It begins with a recitation of the most secure and powerful promise of eternal favor in the entire biblical narrative. God makes a sworn, unbreakable oath to King David. I will not remove from him my steadfast love, or be false to my faithfulness. I will not violate my covenant, or alter the word that went forth from my lips. Once for all I have sworn my holiness. I will not lie to David. His line shall endure forever, his throne as long as the sun before me. Like the moon, it shall be established forever. The witness in the skies is sure. Selah. But now thou hast cast off and rejected. Thou art full of wrath against thy anointed. Thou hast renounced the covenant with thy servant. Thou hast trodden his crown in the dust. So what's in this psalm that could be so heartbreaking? The answer is in the text. It's a psalm of two completely opposite emotions, right next to each other. Part 1 is a beautiful, unbreakable promise. It's a quote of God's own words where he makes a sworn oath to King David. He promises that David's royal family line will last forever. His throne will be as permanent as the sun and the moon. God explicitly says, I will not lie to David. It's one of the most secure and powerful promises of eternal favor in the entire Bible. The promise is absolute. But then, a cry of utter devastation follows. The person writing the psalm looks at the world around him. Maybe his country has been conquered and the king has been overthrown. And he cries out to God in despair. He says, but now you've thrown us away. You're full of rage. You've renounced your own promise and smashed our king's crown in the dust. And that's the part that breaks a heart into multiple pieces. This is the source of the scholar's unbearable sadness. The psalm captures the most painful crisis imaginable for a person of faith, holding a divine, eternal promise in one hand and a reality of total contradiction in the other. It is the raw human cry of looking at the heavens and asking the ultimate question of divine memory. Lord, where are thy former loving kindnesses? Have you forgotten your own holiest oath? So, the sage Ibn Ezra speaks of couldn't read it because it wasn't just an ancient poem to him. It was a perfect expression of a devastating spiritual crisis. It voiced a feeling of abandonment so profound and so real that speaking it aloud was simply too much to bear. It is this wound that Carl Jung explores in his daring work, Answer to Job. He argues that to understand this crisis, we must move past the idea of a static, perfect deity, and instead see Yahweh as a dynamic, paradoxical, and most critically, unconscious entity. Lacking self-reflection, he needs a relationship with humanity to see and know himself. The relationship with humanity, particularly with key individuals, becomes the mirror in which this divine being, slowly and often painfully, begins to see himself. The covenant with King David represents a pivotal and intensely personal stage in this cosmic drama. The foundation of this drama is the solemnity of the divine promise. Yahweh's covenant with the Israelites was a collective one, but with David it became profoundly individual. This was a pact made not just with a people, but with a man and his lineage. As Psalm 89 proclaims, this was intended as an eternal guarantee. I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn unto David my servant, thy seed will I establish forever, and build up thy throne to all generations. My mercy will I keep for him forevermore, and my covenant shall stand fast with him. My covenant will I not break, nor alter the thing that is gone out of my lips. Once have I sworn by my holiness that I will not lie unto David. Jung seizes on the power of this language. Steadfast love, covenant will stand firm. I will not violate, I will not lie. These are absolutes. They form the foundation of the relationship, establishing an expectation of divine consistency and moral integrity. For Jung, this is crucial. Humanity, in its relationship with the divine, rightfully expects God to be the superior partner, whose word is immutable and whose character is reliable. And yet, as Jung points out, Yahweh breaks his oath. From the perspective of the psalmist, looking at the ruin of the Davidic kingdom, God has gone back on his word. This is where Jung locates the psychological earthquake. A modern person, he argues, would be shattered by this. The very ground of being would crumble if the ultimate arbiter of morality were found to be capable of moral flexibility and unreliability that do not jib even at perjury. However, the ancient mind, as Jung notes, was more accustomed to divine caprice. The gods of the pagan pantheons were rife with virtues and vices, their stories filled with trickery, jealousy, and conflict. But Yahweh was different. From the beginning, the relationship was defined by a moral and personal tie. Therefore, the breaking of the covenant is more than a simple misfortune. It is a profound moral and personal injury. This is visible in David's, or the psalmist's, response. He does not simply accept this fate. He challenges God, holding up the memory of the promise against the reality of his suffering. Lord, where are thy former loving kindnesses which thou swearest unto David in thy truth? Jung's paraphrase is brilliant. He imagines the subtext of this lament. For heaven's sake, man, pull yourself together and stop being such a senseless savage. The human partner, in his appeal to reason, memory, and fairness, demonstrates a moral and intellectual consciousness that his divine counterpart seems to lack. David, the human, is forced to become the mature, rational party in the relationship. He has to humor the raging, unconscious deity to avoid annihilation, all the while appealing to a standard of justice that Yahweh himself established but fails to uphold. To truly grasp the depth of this dynamic, we must look closer at David himself. The Bible paints a picture of a man of profound contradictions, making him the perfect foil for an equally paradoxical God. David is a man of deep faith and intimacy. His relationship with Yahweh is passionate and personal. He is the sweet psalmist of Israel, whose prayers are raw, unfiltered conversations with his God. He dances before the Lord with all his might, casting off royal dignity for ecstatic worship. This intense relatedness is what makes the covenant so meaningful and its breach so devastating. Yet David is also a man of moral failure. David is far from perfect. His lust for Bathsheba leads him to commit adultery and orchestrate the murder of her husband Uriah, a loyal soldier. It is a calculated, grievous sin. When confronted by the prophet Nathan, David's response is immediate and total. I have sinned against the Lord. He does not make excuses. He accepts his guilt and endures the tragic consequences. In this, David demonstrates a capacity for self-reflection and moral accountability that Jung argues Yahweh lacks at this stage. David knows he has done wrong and is conscious of his own darkness. He is also a man of suffering and lament. David's life is filled with peril and sorrow. He flees from Saul, mourns the death of his rebellious son Absalom, and faces the consequences of his own actions. The Psalms are a testament to this raw chronicle of fear, despair, and pleas for deliverance. But this suffering forges in him a profound consciousness. He is acutely aware of the fragility of life and the pain of divine absence. This brings us to Jung's central thesis. Yahweh, as portrayed in these texts, is a personality who can only convince himself that he exists through his relation to an object. He is pure, undifferentiated energy. He needs an object such as Israel and David to know himself. Lacking self-reflection, his qualities are not integrated. He can be total justice and its total opposite simultaneously, leading to contradictory actions like making an eternal vow and then breaking it, or creating humanity and then regretting it. Morality, Jung states, presupposes consciousness. Yahweh is too unconscious to be moral. He simply acts out the totality of his being, which contains all opposites. In this framework, David's role becomes cosmically significant. By holding Yahweh accountable, by appealing to reason and the memory of the covenant, David is acting as a vessel of emerging consciousness. He, the mortal man, with his profound flaws, but also his capacity for self-reflection, love, and moral reasoning, becomes the teacher of his God. He provides the reflection in which Yahweh can begin to see his own contradictions. The pain and confusion expressed in the Psalms are the birth pangs of a new level of consciousness, not just for humanity, but for the God image itself. The covenant with David and its dramatic breach force a development. It necessitates a future incarnation, a God who will come to know suffering and human limitation from the inside. A development Jung sees culminating in the figure of Christ. The crisis initiated by the broken covenant with David was not a fleeting disappointment. Jung argues it became a literary deposit in the scriptures, a spiritual wound that remained unhealed. The raw emotion of Psalm 89, with its pointed questions to God, did not simply evaporate. For the thoughtful people who read the scriptures with devotion, a terrifying question now lingered in the sacred texts. What does it mean to worship a God who can violate his own holiest oath? Jung suggests that it is historically possible that these considerations influenced the author of the Book of Job. The unanswered paradox of David's fate created the theological and psychological space for the story of Job to emerge. If the covenant with the chosen king could be broken, what did that mean for the righteous individual? The problem had to be escalated. David's story opened the wound. Job's story would pour salt in it. Job begins where David's lament leaves off. He is the quintessentially righteous man who, like David, initially operates under the assumption of a just and predictable divine order. He believes in a covenant of good behavior, that piety will be rewarded and sin punished. But his ordeal teaches him a far more incisive lesson than even David learned. When Yahweh finally speaks from the whirlwind, he does not answer Job's plea for justice. He offers no explanation. Instead, he unleashes a torrent of cosmic power, pointing to the untamable behemoth and the fearsome crocodile Leviathan. Jung seizes on Yahweh's description of this monster as the key to understanding God's nature at this stage. He beholdeth everything that is high. He is a king over all the children of pride. This, Jung asserts, is Yahweh describing himself. He is not a good God in the human sense. He is not a benevolent ruler or a just judge bound by the terms of a contract. He is a raw, amoral force of nature, an entity of absolute power that stands above the dualities of good and evil, justice and injustice that humanity tries to impose upon him. He is king over all proud beasts, and Job, in his insistence on his own righteousness, has been one of those proud beasts. Job's reaction is one of shrewd and horrified understanding. He says, I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. Jung's interpretation is that Job now sees the terrifying reality. The God he thought he knew, the reliable partner of the covenant, was just a story, a concept heard by the ear. The God he now beholds is a being for whom a covenant is a trifle, a being in certain respects less than human, because he is utterly lacking in the self-reflective consciousness that gives rise to morality. Job understands that arguing with a hurricane is futile. He can only prostrate himself and acknowledge this awesome, inhuman reality. He has learned the lesson. One does not have a right to insist on with a being of such magnitude. This confrontation creates an unbearable tension. A conscious, moral humanity is faced with an unconscious, amoral, and omnipotent God. For Jung, this state is unsustainable. The psyche of God, the God image in humanity, must evolve. It requires a balancing principle. That principle, which had been developing quietly in the background of Jewish thought, is Chokmah, or Sophia, which are representations of wisdom. Jung describes her as the feminine Numen, a divine feminine principle that is a reflection of the ancient mother and love goddesses like Astarte and Ishtar. She is a vibrant, living personality within the Godhead. She embodies the relational, reflecting, and merciful qualities that Yahweh in his raw power seems to lack. The symbols associated with her are profoundly significant. Jung points out her comparison to sacred trees from Ecclesiasticus and Sirach. I was exalted like a cedar in Libanus, and as a cypress tree upon the mountains of Hermon. I was exalted like a palm tree in En-Gadi, and as a rose plant in Jericho, as a fair olive tree in a pleasant field, and grew up as a plane tree by the water. These trees are ancient symbols of the mother goddess and her son lover, Tammuz, Adonis, Osiris, who cyclically dies and is reborn. This connects Sophia to the rhythms of nature, to life, death, and renewal. A wisdom starkly different from Yahweh's brute power. And here, Jung makes a masterful connection back to our starting point. David consulted a mulberry tree oracle. This detail, found in 2 Samuel chapter 5 verses 23 and 24, is electrifying. It shows that David, the man whose broken covenant revealed the terrifying side of Yahweh, was also in touch with this older, chthonic, feminine form of wisdom. Before a battle, God tells him to wait for the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry trees. David, the warrior king, is attuned to the oracular voice of the sacred tree, which is the symbol of Sophia. This suggests that the solution to the problem was latent within the man who first experienced it. David's complex character, at once the fiercely loyal servant of Yahweh and a man in touch with the rustling whispers of the goddess in the trees, contained both the problem and the seed of its resolution. The path forward from the terror of Job's revelation was not a new invention, but the elevation and integration of this feminine wisdom, who was always present, waiting to be recognized as the co-eternal partner and mediator for God. She is the part of God that allows for self-reflection, relationship, and ultimately for a new, more complete kind of covenant. This brings us to the ultimate existential question. What does one do when faced with a loving God who is also a source of terror? A just God who commits perjury. The rationalist, like Thomas Paine, rejects this God. The mystic, like Agrippa, develops techniques to navigate him. But Kierkegaard gives us the answer of David himself. You stay in the relationship. David is the ultimate Kierkegaardian knight of faith. He does not run. He does not rationalize away the contradiction. He holds on to God with both hands and weeps and rages and repents and praises. He dares to stand in the whirlwind and keep the conversation going. His faith is not a belief in a set of propositions. It is a radical, terrifying and unbreakable relational bond. This is his most profound lesson for a modern world that craves certainty. The highest form of faith is the courage to remain faithful amidst the storm of contradiction. But is this really the right thing to do? Or do we even have the choice of safely cutting ties with this unconscious, powerful creator? The crisis we've just explored, the wound in heaven, where a divine promise seems to shatter against the rocks of reality, is one of the most profound and difficult moments in the story of King David. But it is just one chapter in a life of unimaginable complexity. What you have seen here is a single piece of a complete 2.5-hour film I have created, titled The Holy Warlord. In this full version, we will journey far beyond this single wound. We will take each story and paradox and stare directly at it. We will stand with David the alchemist, whose most grievous sins become the prima materia, which is the raw substance of spiritual transformation. We'll open the Gnostic texts that see his psalms as the universal hymn book for the fallen soul's return to the light. We will witness the brutal pragmatist who builds a nation with one hand and gives the chilling deathbed orders of a mafia don with the other. And we will enter the terrifying psychological arena with Carl Jung to see a conscious man become the mirror for an unconscious God. This film is the culmination of immense research, dedication, and love for what I do. And it is available right now, in its entirety. You can unlock The Holy Warlord, along with my entire growing library of exclusive video essays, by becoming a member of the Soul tier. This is available on both Patreon and right here through YouTube memberships. For a pledge of $33, the links for both are in the description below. Thank you for your presence here today. I hope to see you again. This is Irevelato, an independent project meant to enlighten ourselves. My work is to explore timeless currents of history, philosophy, and the human spirit, carefully yet accelerated, to hold them up to the light so that we might better understand ourselves, to reveal the secrets we deserve to know and the lives and stories of luminaries and gods.